Hi, I'm going to show you how to make this beaded silk leaf pendant. So I've got a piece of silk embroidery ribbon foundation here, surf, and an embroidery hoop, and I'm just going to insert the canvas into this small hoop. You can get this canvas from craftyattic.com. So I've drawn now what I want my finished pendant to look like, and it fits in that little hoop. So I'm just going to now quickly cut out this to use as a template. You can of course do these any shape you like. This is just showing you how to use the materials here. So I've got now some felt that I'm going to use for backing. This is just regular acrylic felt. You're not going to see it, it's just to provide a backing for your pendant really. And I'm just going to pin it lightly to the silk embroidery ribbon foundation fabric. I've got an erasable marker here. It's air erasable, and there is an eraser on the other end if you should make any errors and want to erase it more quickly. These marks will disappear in a couple of days. You can get these pens off craftyattic.com. So I'm just now going to freehand draw some lines. These are where I want to lay my silk ribbons for the silky veiny bits of my leaf pendant. So just draw them on freehand. Like I say, if you make a mistake, there's an eraser on the other end, you can just rub it out and start again. So I've got some 13mm pure silk white embroidery ribbon. I'm just running it through a set of mini straighteners, or you can iron it if you haven't got any of those, just to flatten it out. I've got a chenille needle. You need chenille needles for ribbon embroidery. They've got nice sharp points and really fat heads. You can get those off craftyattic.com. So I've put a knot in one end, and I'm just going to bring it up through the canvas and the fabric there. And I'm just going to twist it around a bit so that the ribbon is laying the way I want it to. So I want it to lay over the fabric so that it's raised in the middle, this piece of ribbon. So I'm just going to pass it back down through the fabric. You can use a little pair of pliers if you need to give it a little tug. So there, just lay the ribbon so that it's fairly flat, and then we're just going to run some stitches, just some regular stab stitches with a normal machine thread, just to hold that ribbon where we want it to be. So I've just got a regular needle with some regular thread on. I'm just going to do some stab stitches around the top shape of this leaf, just to hold one edge of this ribbon down. It's obviously quite important that I lay these ribbons as I wish them to be when the project is finished. And I want the silk to be raised up in between the beadwork that I'm going to do, and the beads will follow the ridges that I create in these ribbons now, so we need to get it right at this stage. So I'm just now sewing very quickly along the bottom edge of that piece of ribbon, and I'm leaving a good sort of pucker, a puff of ribbon on top of the fabric there, so that it's raised up, and that's what's going to give me this beautiful effect when the beading is finished. So I'm just sewing along the bottom edge there very quickly with just some stab stitches. You're not going to see these, so you don't need to worry about them too much. You won't see them in the finished article. So there we go. So I'm just using the silk ribbon again. I'm coming back up through the fabric and following the lines that I made on this piece of felt here. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing again, laying the ribbon down in the opposite direction. I've come up exactly next to where I went down on the previous stitch, so that I don't end up with loads of silk on the back of the pendant, making the pendant very bulky. So these ribbons are only just popping under the canvas, and they're popping back up right next to where they went in. So I'm just going to now do stab stitch along the top edge of this ribbon in exactly the same way as I just did the previous piece. So I'm going to get these two edges meeting up and just sew them down. must make sure that you use 100% silk ribbon when you're doing this. Nothing else will fold small enough to pass through your canvas and your felt, and nothing else will give you the type of sheen and shine that you get from pure silk ribbon. So you can get those from the website as well, craftyattic.com. We do free postage if your order is over a minimum amount. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, we still get the free postage deal. So I'm just continuing now to stitch these down. I'm going to continue down the rest of the leaf in the same fashion until I've covered the left hand side of that leaf with the ribbons, and you can see there they're all stitched. Here's a selection of beads and bits and pieces I've collected that are all the right colours for my project. So we've got some pens, some beads, some chips there. Excuse me. So I've got grey green, pastel green and soft green pens. So I'm just touching the grey green pro marker on the silk. I'm allowing the silk to pull out as much pigment as it wants, and I'm allowing the silk and the pens to just do the blending together. You need to make sure that you blend them when they're wet to get the right effect. So that's why I'm only doing 2 or 3 ribbons at a time. I don't want them drying out. You see how we're getting this lovely graduated effect going across the heart here, where we've got the grey green on one side blending over to a darker green in the middle. So these pens are permanent, provided you let them thoroughly dry out, and I mean thoroughly dry out, so a week or more. Heat treat them with a heat gun. You can wash them. I wouldn't advise putting them on clothes unless you do a thorough test first. But for this type of project it's absolutely fine. This will never be laundered. So I've got some Fireline here, which is just beading wire. It's a braided nylon beading wire, and I'm just going to now stitch some little seed beads into the dips that I've got between these ribbons. So what I'm trying to do is form the look of kind of leaf veins and leave the silk poking up and puffing up between the beads that I'm stitching down here. So you can see now I've got the start of that there. I've stitched all these little seed beads onto the silk ribbon. I've got a shell thing here. It's just a disc of an abalone shell. It's got a tiny hole in it, so I'm just going to use that and just stitch it down just to anchor it in place very slightly. So now what we're going to have to do is actually bead this flat onto this piece of work. So I'm bringing the Fireline back up through the fabric. I'm picking up a selection of little seed beads, and I'm going to do them in specific colour order so that they all look the same. So I'm picking up 4 seed beads here, and the idea is that we then pass the line back down through 3 of the beads, missing the top one. So the top one works as a stop, and we're kind of forming a little post. Okay, so a little post full of beads. That's actually too long. If I do them all that length, you won't see any of the disc in the middle, so I'm going to strip those off and start again. So I'm just picking up my beads in the same colour way. So I've got 3 beads there. I'm passing the line and the pin back down through the first 2 beads and using the last bead as a stop. So that's going to form a little post, and what we're going to do is form a series of posts around the edge of this disc. So I need to do them quite close to each other, so within about 1 millimetre. Bring the line back up through and put the beads on in exactly the same order as you did last time. So there I've got a tan bead, a brown bead and a green bead, and then we're feeding the needle back down through the first 2 beads, missing the top bead, and the top bead will then form a stop for the top of that post. If you're having trouble tugging it through, just catch hold of that seed bead on the top and just tug the wire and it'll come through for you. So there, I've done my see, I've done the posts all the way around now. I'm going to feed the wire back up through to the bottom two of the first post, so that I'm bringing the line up to the top bead on one of these posts. And now we're going to catch the needle through every single bead that's at the top of one of these posts. So we're just going to go all the way around this circle, making sure that we catch every single top bead there. So what we're going to do eventually is just pull them all tight together so that they form a close disc, and the posts and the whole thing will actually hold that disc down onto the fabric, or hold it in place. This is a technique you use to insert cabochons and that sort of thing as well. So I'm just going to continue to do that so that I've got a complete circle made, and I've been round and picked up every single one. So I've been right the way around that circle now. I've pulled it tight, and I'm just going through a couple of the beads again. I've pulled it nice and tight, and now I'm just going to feed the fire line back down through a couple of the bottom beads on one of these posts to get the fire line back onto the back of the fabric there. So there I've stitched the rest of the seed beads on that side that I want to. I'm now going to lay some very dark beads down the centre of the leaf. So this is a really good way of making sure that you get a nice neat straight line effect with all of the beads laying on their side. So I'm picking up quite a few of these little seed beads onto the fire line. There's probably about 3/4 of an inch. I'm just then going to pass the needle back down through the fabric, pulling those beads flat, and I'm now going to use the same fire line just to stitch. To couch it down, so I'm going to catch every second bead and just do a little stitch over so that the fire line is holding the fire line that runs through the beads down onto the fabric, so they're all secure and they're not going to go anywhere. So just do that all the way down, and then we're going to repeat that process and work our way down the centre of this leaf so that I've got a central leaf vein effect with these brown beads. So when you're joining to do your next piece, bring the fire line up just before the end bead and pass it through before you then start threading more beads on, and that will make sure that all of your beads are then still laying nice and flat, all in the right direction. So I'm just going to continue then with these beads and couch them down in exactly the same way as I did before. So there's the centre and left side of the leaf finished. I've just got my air erasable pen, and I'm just going to freestyle draw what I want the other half of the leaf to look like. So I think we're going to have 3 large beads set up like that, and I'm just going to put some beads around them in a circle. So I'm just guessing as I go here, just drawing in what I think I want the finished item to look like. Doesn't matter if you make a mistake, you can use the eraser, just rub it out and draw something else. That's the beauty of these air erasable pens. So I'm going to do a kind of little acorn effect here, I think. So I've got some little bead settings here, and a large pearl bead, and have a stop bead on the top. So I'm now going to feed the Fireline back down through, missing the top bead, so that is now securing that to the fabric. And I'm now going to just stitch some seed beads around that in a circle. So you can do couching to get your seed beads in a nice row, so exactly the same as we did before, but we're joining them into a circle by passing the Fireline back through the last one, pulling tight so that they're into a nice circle, and then we're just couching down onto the fabric to make sure everything's secure. That's a really nice way of getting everything neatly lined up and looking very nice indeed. So there I've started to fill out the rest of my design in exactly the same way by couching the beads on, sewing down the individual beads. I'm now going to use some 2mm white silk embroidery ribbon with a chenille needle, a smaller chenille needle this time. And I'm now going to do a series of French knots. So you wind the ribbon around the needle 3 times, pass it back down through the fabric and pull tight, and you'll get a little knot effect on the top. These are very, very effective when worked in silk ribbon. This is going to give me a kind of mossy effect for my leaf here. So I'm just going to now use this technique to fill in all of the remaining gap on that side of the leaf. So we'll do what we did before, we'll work everything in white and then dye it afterwards with the Pro Marker pens to get the effect that we want. So there, I've worked the rest of that side now. I've used some scrap from my first half of the ribbon there to just put some ink on and find out what colours I wish to use. So I've picked up marine and petrol blue now. I'm using the soft green that I used on the right hand edge of the left hand side, and now I'm just blending in the marine to that. So I want a graduated effect, the leaf to get darker as it moves from left to right there. So just allowing the silk to take the pigment that it wants. Let the silk do all of the work, so it'll blend the colours for you. There you go. So we've got a beautiful graduated effect there going over to the right hand side of the leaf. So this little project is quite quick. It looks like it takes a lot of time. I haven't spent much more than a day and a half on this, so it'd be quite easy to start and finish a project like this in a weekend with no trouble at all. And when I say a day, I don't mean a full day. So there we are. We're still just colouring in here. These Pro Marker pens, they do the colour will fade as they dry slightly, so they dry slightly lighter than they are when you apply them. But as long as you know that, that's great. And it's always good to use a scrap bit of ribbon from a previous project, you know, just an end bit that you've cut off. Keep all of those because they're very good for testing your colours on. So they're just filling in the last of the French knots there with that colour, just dotting around a bit with the darker colour. So now we just pop that out of the hoop, and I'm just going to cut about a millimetre and a half away from each edge. You need to leave yourself this little gap because this is where we're going to put our edging beads. You don't want to cut too close. There we go. So I'm just going to now cut a piece of felt for the back. So just place those two roughly together and cut yourself a backing piece. This will ensure the back of our project looks as beautiful as the front. So there. So I've got some silicone glue here. I'm just going to pop a little piece out onto a tiny piece of scrap paper and then just coat the backing piece with some silicone glue. Silicone glue is great because it won't bleed through, soak through, it'll just do what you want it to do, just stick to the back of your work there. And now we can tidy up the edges a little bit by trimming and being a little bit more accurate to get a good edge on this. So I've done some edging here, so there's 7 beads onto the beading line. I'm picking them up in a very particular order, so they're always the same. I've got 2 dark brown, 1 green, 1 tan, 1 green, 2 dark brown, so there's a symmetrical pattern to it there. And just pass the fire line through, missing about 1 millimetre each time you do this to give your beads room to lay down, and that will form your edging. I've got a little clasp here, and I'm just going to use the fire line just to tack that on. This fire line's brilliant, it's so tough it won't break, and because it's braided it doesn't spring everywhere like fishing line does, so this is specifically for beading, and it's lovely, it stays where you want it to. It's not difficult to use at all. So I'm just going to then continue with the bead edging, so picking up the beads in exactly the same order. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're consistent, so you decide what you want it to look like and make them all look the same, so you get a nice striped effect around the edge of your leaf. So now I'm just going to work away at that and finish the rest of the edging. So I'm just going to take a moment here to show you how to put a knot in the fire line. So just form a loop and then just stitch through it with your needle 5 times and then pull tight, and you can see that you end up with a nice long little knot there. It's very tight, very secure. You want to clip your end off nice and close to that, and then you can just tuck that fire line end underneath any bead that you happen to be sewing. I'm going to just sew a bead here front and back over this end of the clasp so that it's nice and covered. So I've got a little hole there in the edging beads, so I'm just going to sew one of these green beads in because it happens to be the right size. I'll do one on the back as well, just for tidiness' sake. And just a few anchoring stitches through. And you can cut that off now. I'm going to show you now how to finish off with this edging. I've got 1 square bead, 2 seed beads, a larger green bead, and then another seed bead on the top. Feed them down to the end so that it's next to your project. And then pass the needle just only back through the large green bead on the top. So then we're using the seed bead on the top as a kind of stop bead. We're turning the wire around it. So pulling that nice and tight, and then putting 2 seed beads and a square bead back onto the needle. I'm missing 4 rows, and I'm catching between the 3rd and the 4th bead on the 5th. On the 5th row of beads there, and then I'm passing the thread around back again and just doing a little slip stitch, pulling tight so that it's all secured and it's not going to go anywhere. So once again, 1 square bead, 2 seed beads, a large green bead, and then another seed bead for the top. I'm feeding the wire back down through the large green bead only, and you can hold on to the last little tiny seed bead and pull really tight with your wire to pull that all nice and tight. And then with 2 seed beads and a square bead, obviously you don't have to use these in exactly the same way, as long as you know how many beads you need, that's fine. So again, I've missed 4 rows. I've caught between the 3rd and the 4th bead on the 5th row of beads there, and there we have our project finished. So you can order all of the embroidery materials that you need from craftyattic.com. Please do, it supports the making of these videos, and it will support the making of further videos. So thanks for watching this, subscribe to us on YouTube, and look forward to seeing you soon.